When she speaks in other voices, Haya always keeps in front of her something that looks like a map painted on the board. There are various mysterious signs on it and drawing of a Safariot tree, only quadrupled. It looks like an extremely ornate cross, like four-branched snowflake that can't exist in nature. She arranges on it pieces of bread with feathers stuck into them, and buttons and seeds, and each one looks bizarre, like a human figurine, but nightmarish, indecent somehow. Haya has a pair of dice, one of them with numbers on it, and the other one with letters. On the board are some clumsily painted circles. The boundaries between them are blurred, indistinct. There are scattered letters and symbols, and in the corners there are animals, suns, and moons. There is a dog and a big fish, maybe a carp. The board must be old in some places. The paint has completely peeled off, leaving no understandable traces of what used to be there. Now, Haya toys with the dices, rolling them around in her palms, staring at the board. You never know how long any of it's going to take. But then her eyelids start to blink and tremble, and the dice are rolled, revealing an answer. According to the prediction, Haya then sets out the figures on the board, whispers something to herself, and nudges them, changes their layouts, sets some of them to the side, takes some others from somewhere else. The new one's even stranger than the last. It is hard to comprehend this odd game looking at it from outside, since its configuration is constantly changing.
Jacob said, "It's better to see with your eyes than write down a bunch of words." Jacob said, "If the sky is a mirror that reflects time, the image of the buried houses must always hang over the city." Jacob said, "I learned how to go outside myself, in a sense, and take myself by the throat." Jacob said, "The alternative numbering of the pages in this book is a nod to books written in Hebrew, as well as a reminder that every order, every system is simply a matter of what you've gotten used to."
Suddenly, as though from some unexpected impact, Yenta sees everything from above. She's surprised to discover that she can easily slide out of her body and be suspended over it. She looks right at her own face, a strange feeling. But soon as she floats away, gliding along the drafts of air on the vibrations of sounds passing without difficulty through wooden walls and doors. Now, Yenta sees everything from above, and then her gaze goes back to under her closed eyelids. That's how it goes the whole night, soaring and renewed descent, back and forth over the border. It tires her. And yet both the falling and the rising are pleasant. The only nasty thing is that movement, whistling and rough, that tries to push her out to somewhere far away, past the horizons, that force, external and brutal, that it would be impossible to face were the body not protected by an amulet from the inside. Strange. Her thoughts blow over the whole region. Wind, says some voice in her head, which must be her own. Wind is the vision of the dead as they gaze upon the world from where they are. Haven't you ever noticed the fields of grass? That has to be because there is a dead person watching. Because if you counted all the dead, you find there are many more of them than there are of the living. Their souls have been cleansed already over meanderings through lots of lives. And now, they await the Messiah, who will come to finish the task. And they look upon everything. That's why the wind blows on earth. Wind is their watchful gaze. From where Yenta is looking, there are no dates, and so there's nothing to mark any celebrations with, nor any cause for alarm or concern. The sole traces of time are the blurry streaks that travel past her sometimes, stripped down to just a few characteristics, ungraspable, stripped of speech but patient. These are the dead. Yenta slowly gets into the habit of counting them. Even when people completely stop being able to feel their presence, when they can no longer be reached by any sign from them, the dead still traverse this purgatory of memory. Deprived of human attention, they do not have a place of their own, no any sort of foothold. Misers will take care of the living, yet the dead are neglected by the most gracious and generous.
What we see when our eyes are closed, and where that thing we see comes from, whether from impurities on the eyeball, or because the eye is configured more like the lanterna magica you can find in Italy. The idea that everything I see now, the darkness punctuated by the sharp points of the stars above Rohatyn, the outlines of homes, small tilted, the lump of the castle, and not too far away the sharply pointed church tower, like apparitions, the well pole shooting askew into the sky as if in protest, and maybe even the rumble of the water from somewhere further down, and the very light scraping of the leaves the frost has taken. The idea that all of that arises out of his own mind is both terrifying and alluring in equal measure. What if we are imagining all of it? What if each of us sees everything differently? Does everyone see the color green the same? Or is green maybe just a name we use, as if it were a paint to code completely distinct experiences in order to communicate, when in reality, every one of us is viewing something different? Is there not some way this can be verified, and what would happen if we were to really open our eyes, if we were to see by some miracle the reality that surrounds us. What might that be like?
Everything seems endless to me when I try to describe it, and out of helplessness, the pen falls out of my hand. Every description seems not to be able to exhaust it. When I write, every detail takes me back to another, and then the next one again to something else, some sign or gesture, so that I must always make a decision about what direction to take in order to tell this story, and where to fix my internal gaze, that same powerful sense that is able to summon past images. So in writing, I must always stand at crossroads, and those crossroads are before my eyes, those bifurcating paths, of which one, the simplest one, the middle path, is for the fools, while the other, to the right, is for the overconfident. And then there is the third path, which one is for the brave, the desperados. But even that one is full of traps, hexes, potholes, and calamitous occurrences.
Everything is connected to everyone else. The world is simply the multiplication of this room and Shores Rohatyn's home above the market square. Through the slits in the curtains and the haphazardly nailed door, starlight seeps in, which means that even the stars are close acquaintances. Say one word in a room in Rohatyn, and soon it will be carried all over the world on the paths and roads taken by commercial expeditions, with the help of the messengers who roam the earth incessantly, bearing letters and repeating gossips, like Nachman ben Levi of Busk.
A rectification or tikkun consisted in a holy man joining with the sinner's soul, step by step, passing through all three of the soul's different forms. First, the nefesh of the Holy One, his animal spirit, connected with the sinner's nefesh, and then, when it became passable, Ruah, the feelings and will of the Holy One, joined with the sinner's Ruah, so that in the end, the Holy One's Neshama, that divine aspect we all carry within ourselves, could join with the sinner's Neshama. And when this happened, I could feel how much sin and darkness is in this man called Jacob Frank.
It happens that sometimes I choose the simple road, the one in the middle, and I naively forget about all the complications of what I am describing, trusting in the so-called facts, the events as I would narrate them to myself, as if my eyes were the only ones to perceive them, as if there were no hesitation in existence, and things were as they appear to be, even as we behold them. as I discussed that so feverishly with Rébecca in Molitva back in Smyrna. Then I write, Jacob said, as if it weren't my ears that heard it, but God's. That is what Jacob said, and that is a fact. I describe a place as if others would have experienced it the way I did, as if that were the way it was. I trust my memory, and in recording what comes out of it, I make that frail instrument into a hammer that is to forge a bell. Going down that path, I believe that what I described really happened, and that it happened that way once and for all. I even believe that there was never any other chance of anything else happening instead.
Every place has two characters. Every place is double. What is sublime is also fallen. What is clement is at the same time base. In the deepest darkness lies the spark of the most powerful light, and vice versa, where omnipresent clarity reigns. A pit of darkness lurks inside the seed of light. The Messiah is our doppelganger, a more perfect version of ourselves. He's what we could be had it not been for the fall. Should men, in fact, not be like this? Double? What would it be like if we all had twins? Boys for girls, girls for boys? We could all talk without words. In the new world, there will be a different alphabet, different symbols and other rules. Maybe it will go bottom to top instead of top to bottom. Maybe people will move from old age into youth and not the other way around. Maybe people will arise out of the earth and eventually vanish into the bellies of their mothers. Did they explain to people in their church that this was how things were going to be? That everything would be reversed, and the servants would become the lords, and the lords the servants? But would this in fact be just and good? When I went out into the streets of Smyrna, passing hundreds of people hurrying about their business, I couldn't shake the thought that among them might be the Messiah, but that no one was able to recognize him. And the worst of it was that the Messiah himself might not be aware of it.
The simple road is false. When such doubt comes over me, I choose the road on the right. Now it is the other way around. I am the rudder and the ship, and so I focus on my own experiences, as if the world before my eyes did not exist, but was instead formed solely by my senses. And in spite of what Rébecca always taught me, I blow on my own fire and thereby ignite the embers of myself, about which I ought to forget, the ashes of which I should rather scatter to the wind, but instead I feed it until it is a gigantic flame. And then what do I have? Me. 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 A regret-worthy state of accidental imprisonment in a hall of mirrors, the sort the gypsies sometimes put up in order to charge an admission fee.
I often have the same dream, and Rébecca always said to pay attention to dreams that frequently repeat, for they are our link with infinity. I dream that I am wandering around a large house that contains many rooms, doors and passages. I don't know what I am looking for. Everything is old and moldy. The upholstery on the walls, once lavish, is now faded and torn, and the floors are decayed. This dream worries me, for I would prefer to dream like the Kabbalists above about all the palaces, each containing and concealing the next, with their never-ending corridors that eventually end up at God's throne. In my dream, there are only rotted labyrinths with no exit. When I told Jacob, expressing my concerns, he just laughed. The place is haunted. Spring is autumn there, and autumn spring. Time flows according to its own rhythm, which is different from down below. Actually, only a few people know how huge this cave is, but somehow everybody knows that it is in the shape of the letter Aleph. It is a great underground Aleph, a seal, the first letter upon which the world rests. Maybe somewhere far away in the world under the earth, there are also other letters, a whole alphabet made out of nothing, out of underground air, darkness, the plash of underground streams. Israel believes that it is a great stroke of luck to live so near the first letter and near the Jewish cemetery, with a view of the river. It always takes his breath away to look down from the hill above the village to the world. It is so beautiful and so cruel at the same time. A paradox that seems to be taken straight from the books of Zohar.
They take Yenta in great secrecy in the morning. They have placed her in a shroud and covered in hay as well in case of prying strangers' eyes. 4 men and Pestle. The men go down on ropes through the narrow entrance to the cave, taking the body, which is as light as a bundle of dry leaves. They disappear for a quarter of an hour and return without the body. They've laid it comfortably on the skins in the niche in the rock, in the bowels of earth, as they say. They also say that it was strange to carry a human body in that state, since it's no longer human, more like birds. Yenta goes along with them for a while, to the road, counting their hats, but then she gets bored. On her way back, she strokes the tips of growing grass and shakes the fluff from the dandelions. The next day, Pestle goes down into the cave. She lights an oil lamp, and after a dozen meters, finds herself in a high chamber. The lamp's flame lights up the strange walls, which look as though they're made out of onyx, covered in bulges and hanging icicles. To Pestle, it seems as though she has been transported onto one of those crystals that appeared on Yente's skin. She sees her great-grandmother's body lying on a natural platform, and it looks smaller than it did yesterday. But her skin is pink, and that same smile roves her face. Forgive us. This is just for a little while. We will take you away from here as soon as it is safe. She sits for a spell and talks to Yenta about her future husband, who, although is a year older than Peso, is really just a child.
The path to the left is only for those who have shown they deserve it. Those who understand what Rébecca always said, that the world itself demands to be narrated, and only then does it truly exist. Only then can it flourish fully. But also that by telling this story of the world, we are changing the world. That is why God created the letters of the alphabet, so we might have the opportunity to narrate it to Him of what He created. God is blind. Did you not know that? Rébecca always chuckled at this. He would say, He created us so we would be His guides, His five senses. And he would chuckle long and hard until he began to cough from the smoke.
There are external and internal things. External things are appearances, and we live amongst external things like people in a dream. And the laws of appearances must be taken for real laws when, in fact, they are not. When you live in a place and a time in which certain laws are in effect, then you must observe those laws. But never forget that they are only partial systems, never absolute. For the truth is something else. And if a person is not prepared to come to know it, then it may seem frightening and terrible, and that person may curse the day he learned of it. But I do believe that everyone can tell what kind of person he truly is. It is just that deep down, he doesn't want to find out. We no longer believe in the things of which the elder Kabbalists spoke, such that if all the sparks could be collected from the darkness, they would unite into a messianic tikkun and transform the world for the better. We have already crossed over, because divinity and sinfulness are everlastingly interconnected. Sabbatai said that after the Torah of Bria, the Torah of the created world will come, the Torah of Atzilut. But Jacob and all of us know that the two Torahs are interwoven, and the only thing that can be done is to move beyond the both of them. The struggle is about leaving behind that point where we divide everything into evil and good, light and darkness, getting rid of all those foolish divisions, and from there starting a new order all over again. We don't know what's past that point. It's like putting all your eggs in one basket and just taking that step into the darkness. We are headed into the darkness. The greatest power, however, belongs not to corporeal action, but rather to action that unites with words, as the world was created out of words, and its foundations are the word. Thus, the greatest strange deed, the exceptional act, is pronouncing out loud the name of God, Shem Ha-Meforash. there exists in Ein Sof, that is, in the infinite itself, in the divine source, absolute good, which is the origin and source of all perfection and all good in the world. It is perfection, and perfection requires no alterations. It is dignified and immovable. There can be no movement in it. But for us, who look upon it from the underside of creation, from afar, this motionlessness seems dead, and therefore bad. Yet perfection excludes movement, creation, change, and therefore the very possibility of our freedom. That is why it is said that in the depths of absolute good, the root of all evil is concealed, and that root is the negation of every miracle, every movement, and all that is possible, and all that might still happen. For us then, for people, good is something other than what it is for God. For us, good is the tension between God's perfection and his withdrawal in order that the world might arise. For us, good is the absence of God from where he could instead be.
Suddenly, it seemed to me that those decorations, once fleeting, envisioned as the whole world had now faded and aged so that no one could possibly be taken in by them. The illusion is so imperfect, hideous, and crippled. We are living in Haya's living board game. We are the little figures molded out of bread by her nimble fingers. We move around the circles drawn over the board, meeting one another, and everyone is a task and a challenge for everyone else. And now we are approaching the decisive place. One toss of the dice, and we will gain or lose everything.
Names must come about before nations do. The sound that creates them corresponds to a certain accord of the universe. That is your real name. The names we carry on the street, on the other hand, around the market, traveling in a carriage on a muddy road, or those others used to call us, all that is just tacked on us. Those names are useful like the clothing you put on to go to work. There's no sense in getting attached to them. They come and go like anything. Here 1 minute, gone the next. In the name of the idea of life from the light of the world. Is life itself not a stranger to this world? And are we not strangers? And is our God not a stranger? Is this not why we appear so different, so distant, so scary and incomprehensible to those who really do belong to this world? But this world is equally bizarre and incomprehensible to any stranger to it, and its rules are incomprehensible, as are its customs. For the stranger comes from the furthest distance, from the outside, and he must endure the fate of the foreigner, alone and defenseless, completely misunderstood. We are foreigners, Jews, and we will always be homesick. Prophets never come from within. All prophets must come from elsewhere, must suddenly appear, seem strange, out of the ordinary, be shrouded in mystery like the one the Goyim have even of the virgin birth. a prophet has to walk differently, talk differently. Ideally, he hails from some unimaginable locale, source of exotic words and smells, mirth, oranges, bananas. It is good not to be able to understand the language, not to know the customs, to glide like a spirit among others who are distant and unrecognizable. Then a particular kind of wisdom awakens, an ability to surmise, to grasp the things that aren't obvious. Only foreigners can truly understand the way things work. Jacob has begun to introduce himself not as before, not as Yankele Leibovich, but as Jacob Frank. Frank is what Jews from the West are called in Nikopol. That's what they call his father-in-law and his wife Hannah. Frank or Frank means foreign. Jacob likes this, being foreign, and being foreign is a quality of those who have frequently changed their place of residence. He's told Nachman that he feels best in new places because it is as if the world begins afresh every time. To be foreign is to be free, to have a great expanse stretched out before you, the desert, the steppe, to have the shape of the moon behind you like a cradle, the deafening symphony of the cicadas, the air's fragrance of melon peel, the rustle of the scarab beetle when, come evening, the sky turns red and it ventures out into the sand to hunt, to have your own history, not for everyone, just your own history written in the tracks you have behind. The Messiah is something more than a figure and a person. It is something that flows in your blood, resides in your breath. It is the dearest and most precious human thought that salvation exists. And that's why you have to cultivate it like the most delicate plant. Blow on it, water it with tears. Put it in the sun during the day, move it into a warm room at nighttime.
Among the advantages of the state in which Yente has found herself is that now she knows the understandings of the workings of the messianic machine. She knows the world from above it. It is dark, faintly marked by sparks of light, each of them a home. The messianic machine is like that mill standing over the river. The dark water turns the great wheel evenly, without regard for the weather, slowly and systematically. The person by the wheel seems to have no significance. His movements are random and chaotic. The person flails. The machine works. The motion of the wheels transfer power to the stone. Gears that grind the grain. Everything that falls into them will be crushed into dust.
What is our real task if not the establishment of equilibrium between the unity of God and the multiplicity of the world created by Him? As for ourselves, people, are we not abandoned in this in-between the one and a world of divisions? This limitless between has its strange critical point, the double. This is the first experience of the thinking man when he notices the abyss that appears between himself and the rest of the world. This is the painful two, the fundamental crack in the created world that gives rise to contradictions and all sorts of dualisms. This and that, you and me, left and right, Sitra Akra, or the other side, the left side, the demonic forces. The Trinity is holy, like a wise wife, reconciling contradictions. Two is like a young raw doe leaping over every contradiction. That's what makes the Trinity holy, that it can tame evil. But because the Trinity must ceaselessly work on behalf of the equilibrium it disturbs, it is shaky. And it isn't until you get to 4 that you attain the highest holiness and perfection that restores divine proportions. The daughters of Srol Majerkovic of Bosk have already divided up names amongst themselves. Shima turns into Victoria, Elia into Salomea, Freyna becomes Róża, Masha is Tekla, and Miriam, Maria. Esther takes a long time to choose her name and finally resigns herself to Teresa. In this way, it is as if there are now 2 versions of every person, all having doubles by different names.
Yenta sees all of this from above, watches names peeling off the people who have carried them. But those names have already lost their luster, dulled like the snakeskins from which life has faded even before they're shed. This loss of names in the Vanya grass might be alarming, as the sight of disposable things, of transient and fleeting beings always is. But Yenta sees at the same time many things that repeat. Yenta herself is repeating. The cave is repeating. Repeating are the great river and the passage across it on foot. Repeating is the snow, and so too are the parallel sleigh tracks marking the exposed, broad space with the alarming diagraph. Repeating is the stain on the snow, yellowish, unpleasant. Repeating are the goose feathers in the grass. Sometimes they catch onto people's clothing and travel with them.
In some sense, life is this constant loss. Improving bias station, getting richer is the greatest illusion. In reality, we are richest at the moment of our birth. After that, we begin to lose everything. That is what the Madonna represents. The initial whole, the divine unity of us, the world and God, is something that must be lost. What remains in its wake is just a flat picture, a dark patch of a face, an apparition, an illusion. By seeing something, we generally have the impression of gaining something, but the modality of the visible becomes inescapable, that is to say, doomed to a question of being. When to see is to feel that something inescapably escapes us. In other words, when seeing is to lose, everything is there. And as the desert is the only place on earth where time spins around, loops back, then leaps ahead like some fat locust. Select pairs of eyes might be able to get a glimpse into the future here. Dusk approaches, and the last scraps of color fade into darkness. White merges into gray, gray becomes black, and black vanishes into the abyss that opens up before human eyes. It is everywhere, under everything in the world.
Frena's great-granddaughter, who was called Tarnar Black, the eldest in her family, absolutely insisted that they not go to Barstov to register as the Germans had ordered them to. Never trust any authority, she would say. Which is why when all the Jews of Korolkova were setting off for the city with their belongings bundled, they quietly, in the night, pulling little carts carrying their things, went into the forest. On October 12, 1942, 5 families from Korolkova, 38 people, the youngest of whom was just a child of 5 months, and the eldest of whom was 79, left their village homes and entered the cave just before the dawn from the forest entrance, where the powerful underground letter Aleph has its uppermost, rightmost stroke. Some of the rooms in the cave are filled with crystals that come out of the walls and down from the ceilings. People say that these are frozen drops of light that got stuck down in the ground and stopped shining. But as soon as they are touched with a candle flame, they will light up again, showing their eternal silent interior. In one of these rooms lies Yente. The damp alighting on her skin for so many years is now fully adhered to her bones, crystallizing, sparkling, shining bright. Its glow grows deep into her body and renders her almost translucent. Yenta transforms slowly into crystal, and in a few million more years, she'll be a diamond. Meanwhile, her eyes are still moving, and a smile slowly spreads across her face, not directed at anyone. That long pinkish crystal grown into the rock, which lights up from time to time from the sparingly used oil lamps, shows a blurred and indistinct interior. The children who have become used to life in the cave, now already able to venture deep inside it, say that piece of the rock is still alive. If you tried to shine a light on it all the way inside, you would see a tiny human face in there. But of course, no one takes this seriously, especially since nearly a year and a half spent in the dark has permanently debilitated their eyesight. The adults go out from time to time for provisions, but they never venture as far as any of the nearby villages. The villagers treat them like ghosts, leaving for them, as it is by accident, through some oversight, bags of flour or potatoes out behind their barns. In April 1944, someone throws a bottle into the hole leading into the cave. Inside the bottle is a piece of paper that says in a clumsy hand, "Germans gone." They come out blinded, shielding their eyes from the light. They've all survived, and in the post-war chaos, most of them managed to immigrate to Canada, where they tell their story so improbable that few believe them. Don't light a candle. Remember you once told me how in your mother's village there was a woman who did not fully die? Yes, that's true. My mother said she kept breathing, and she just got smaller. She was our great-grandmother. In the end, she was as small as a child or a doll. They left her in the cave.
As I walked in this way through that frozen city, I remembered that particular evening in Salonika when the Spirit entered Jacob for the first time. Jacob was drenched in sweat, and fear had dulled his eyes, and the air around us got so thick that it seemed to me that we were moving slower and speaking slower, as though suspended in honey. And everything then was true, so true. The whole world hurt, for you could feel how unwieldy it was and how far removed from God. And then and there, young and unseasoned, we were in our proper place. God spoke to us. And now, everything has become untrue. This whole city, painted lightly on a panel, as the background is painted for puppets in little market fair theaters. I felt very strange. I had the overwhelming impression that everything around me was false, that it was artificial, as if the world had been painted by some skilled artist on canvases hung up all around. Or to put it another way, as if everything around me had been made up, and by some miracle had taken the shape of reality.